I think the Morning Edition theme's been around for 40 years, and I would wager that, I heard it the day it came on the air, and I've heard it ever since then. It's really a extremely familiar and well-loved brand, but more importantly, their sonic identity really kind of frames a lot of listeners' days. The vast majority of the people who participated in the study were NPR listeners. About 60% of them listened to Morning Edition 5 days a week. So it was a big deal for Morning Edition to update this theme. The Man-Made team had already done a lot of work on this, and through a lot of the research that we had done together, they had a lot of really good, clear touch points about what works and what doesn't, how far you can take a sonic identity without violating people's expectations, etc. So they really came to us with a more or less complete version of the new theme song, and we were really just serving as kind of a litmus test or a sniff test to make sure that it was going in the right direction, and that it didn't push impressions of Morning Edition or NPR in the wrong direction. We wanted to understand both explicit and implicit responses to two elements. One was this long-form Morning Edition theme, and the other was a new sonic logo for the NPR brand that's been on the air for a little while. We had, this is one of the situations where Man-Made Music and NPR together were confident that they had found something that was a very good candidate. And so instead of our job being to test alternatives against each other, our job was really to check that the new sonic identity wasn't going in the wrong direction, wasn't going backwards on any of the attributes and emotional attachments that NPR has on its own. But at the same time to check that it's going in the right direction on the attributes that are of most interest, while giving listeners a more modern and energetic impression of the sound. If you listen to it, you'll hear that there's something extremely familiar about it, and the theme is more or less intact. Certain phrases from it are there almost in their entirety, except that they have a much different feel about them. They have a different sound stage that they're working with, a different set of instruments, and a slightly more youthful sort of feel about it that's probably reflected by the composition of the orchestra playing the new theme. So it was really a matter of confirmation and looking, testing to ensure that they haven't violated any of these sort of essential drivers. But going back to what I was saying before, what happens when you're updating a theme? One of the really interesting things that played a big role here, but plays a role in all of our sonic work for brands, is that anytime you change something that's very familiar to people, you'll have a certain amount of dissonance, right? And you'll pick that up in the data. You'll see that that things are that attributes that were accruing to an older sonic identity that revolve around self-identification with the brand or emotional response to the combination of the sonic identity and the visual identity of the brand, for example. So if you, which we did in this case as well, looking at the logos for Morning Edition, the logo for NPR News, and the sonic identities that go along with them. We test the visual logo by itself, we test the sonic element by itself, and then we put the two together. And we do that with a lot of brands. You'll see that anytime you introduce a new brand, a new sonic identity, or for that matter, if you introduce a new visual identity for a brand, you'll see that there's a little bit of dissonance, especially among the people who are most familiar with that brand, right? And that'll tend to depress your scores a little bit. But what we know from experience is that once you introduce that new sonic identity, that things will continue to move in the direction indicated by that first test, not in terms of away from your old sonic identity, but if all of the metrics are kind of pointing in the right direction, they might be a little bit depressed with a new sonic logo because of that little bit of dissonance. But we know that over time, as that sonic logo is introduced, and depending on how frequently people encounter it, they get used to it very quickly. The more similar it is to your existing sonic logo, the better, but they do get used to it more quickly, and as long as the attributes are pointing in the right direction, you may add a few attributes, or you may turn the brand around where a sound is seen as somewhat different from the brand when people first hear it, but it has these attributes that the brand wants to emphasize, right, or enhance by using this new sonic logo. And the attributes that accrue to the brand accrue maybe at a lower rate to the new sonic logo than it did to the old sonic logo. We know that over time they will come back up or exceed the level of association with the brand, those attributes. There's always a little bit of an adoption curve whenever you introduce anything new. The question isn't when it's new, people may find it a little bit more interesting or a little bit less interesting. If it's different from what the brand has done before, and it's sufficiently different from what the brand has done before, then there will always be a little bit of dissonance at first. But if all of the metrics are pointing in the direction of the existing brand, where you want them to be at least, and it's going to be attached to the same other kind of constellation of brand assets that people know that brand for, then people will very quickly adopt that, and you'll see those scores rise in that same direction over a short period of time.